This is Mike Alber, and you're watching the TV Writer Podcast.
Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for scriptwriting information in print and on the web, and by Final Draft scriptwriting software, the entertainment industry standard for scriptwriting worldwide. My name is Gray Jones, and I want to welcome you to the TV Writer Podcast, partner of Script Magazine, episode 35 for Monday, September 26th, 2011. Well, today I have a great interview for you, and that's with Mike Alber, a writer for Death Valley, most recently, and also someone who has just great stories about selling pitches, about writing with a writing partner, about writing across the distance, and actually some really interesting stories about writing and selling yourself across the distance, because despite being across the distance, he's had a number of projects optioned, pitches that were bought. He's even gotten a staff job on Death Valley, which is on MTV, and he got that when he wasn't even living in LA. Now, he'll tell you that it is still good to live in LA, but you want to hear his stories. You're going to love that interview, but first, a few news items. One of them is that I am looking for people or companies who would like to advertise on the podcast. And that's not just companies. That could even be yourself. The advertising rates are very low, and these podcasts do get advertised at the Script Magazine website. They go out in Final Draft email blasts to hundreds of thousands of Final Draft users. And so if you want to get your name out there, this might be a great way to do it. If you're interested in advertising on the podcast, or if you know of a company or person who could be interested, please send an email to mail@tvwriterpodcast.com. It'd be greatly appreciated. Had a big server bill to pay this week, and for the moment, it came out of my pocket. I would love to get some of that pocket money back. But another way that you can actually support is go to tvwriterpodcast.com, and among all the resources there, like the free TV Writer Twitter database, there's also a store where you can buy a number of great writing books, and you should definitely stock your shelf. And anything actually that you buy at amazon.com, if you use the links from the site, and all within that one session, then a portion of that purchase can go to support the podcast as well. Straight donations are always appreciated. And there's lots of other ways to take part. And you can find out more on the site about how to do that. Make sure you do follow me on Twitter. @GrayJones is my handle. And you can find out about interviews that are coming. And speaking about interviews that are coming, I also want to mention that if you know any working TV writers, I would love it if you could ask them, tap their shoulder and say, would you like to come on the podcast? It's a great way for them to get their name out there. And if you could send an email to mail@tvwriterpodcast.com and hook us up, I'd greatly appreciate it. Always looking for new writers to come on the podcast. But speaking of new writers coming on the podcast, we have Mike Alber, and you're going to love his interview. Here we go. Enjoy. This is Gray, and I'm here with writer Mike Alber. How you doing, Mike?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Glad to be here.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, and it's so cool to connect with somebody through the TV Writer chat and on Twitter, and then to talk with them on the podcast. Actually, I think that's how I first encountered you, was on the TV Writer chat.
Yeah, I think so. I started doing Twitter sort of seriously, I guess, if you can call it that, just about 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. And I found it a great tool for networking with, other writers. And, writing, even TV writing, can be a lonely enterprise sometimes. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that Twitter is an amazing tool for connecting with people and building, relationships.
Mm-hmm. Very, very cool. Well, we'll get to the present a little later, but first we're going to go way back to the past. And where did you grow up? Was it in Michigan?
Yeah. I grew up in, I was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan, on the west side of the state. And then I grew up in a farming community called Sparta, Michigan. Mm-hmm. I was a proud Sparta Spartan. Uh-huh. That's how original they were with their naming the Sparta Spartans. Mm-hmm. So I grew up there, and I ended up, I thought that when I was growing up, I would end up being a doctor or a lawyer or something like that, something stable mm-hmm. that was respectable. Being a writer didn't really seem like something that you could do. It seemed like more of a hobby. And so that actually sort of colored my choices in college and then in graduate school, because I never really thought that writing for, in the Midwest, writing for television, if you decide you want to do that, you're the only person that that is going to be doing that.
Yeah.
Or at least I was the only person I knew. And so it seemed like a pipe dream, and so I decided I really wanted to be a doctor. So I ended up going to the University of Michigan. I got a Bachelor of Science degree in biology. Took all of the classes, took my MCAT, got into medical school, went to medical school for half of a year, and then as soon as I got there, I realized, this is not for me.
Now, you had been writing since high school with a writing partner. Tell me about that.
Yeah, absolutely. My friend Gabe Snyder, he was a couple years below me in school, but he and I were together in a media productions class. We basically broadcasted the school news to through the closed circuit television system, and so we'd done some things with that, and then we ended up writing a couple of short films. Mostly just comedy stuff, just for fun, to use the equipment that we had at our disposal. But we ended up, we were good friends, and we ended up, really enjoying working together. And so even though I didn't think it was a serious enterprise, it was something I had fun doing. It was like writing screenplays sort of became a hobby for me.
And so you continued doing that even across the distances in college. Where did Gabe go?
Gabe went to NYU, and he wasn't, NYU has a great, the Tisch Film School, but he didn't do that either. He ended up doing, I think, psychology and math or something like that. And but what we would do is, on his first summer break there, he came to Ann Arbor where I was, and we wrote our first full-length screenplay together then. And then later on, as we decided that this is something we really like, we would write long distance. We got, like the cell phones with, the plan where, you can call somebody unlimited times and it's fine. Doesn't hurt your bill at all. So we both got cell phone plans like that. And we just ended up, we'd spend hours on the phone, like outlining, hashing out story ideas, but at that point it was just, screenplay writing, and it was really just for fun.
And so there, you hit a point where it became more than fun. Now, you had dropped out of medical school in 2003. Right. And what happened then?
Well, my parents were very disappointed. That's what happened. My family had no idea what I was doing. All I knew was that I did not want to do medicine, and I wanted to do something creative. And so I ended up getting a master's degree in creative writing from Eastern Michigan University. And that was fiction writing, actually. It wasn't even screenwriting. But after I had left medical school, and that's such a, like a regimented, you study and you spend hours in the library and you go to labs, this sort of felt like a revelation, that I could spend my time thinking about story and characters and building these worlds in my head and on the page. And that was sort of amazing. So I really loved that. I embraced that. And thankfully I was dating a woman who is now my wife, who also let me embrace that. And she was super supportive, when, you consider that when we started dating, she thought I was going to be a doctor. And then, now moved her halfway across, all the way across the country to Los Angeles. So she's been very supportive of that. But yeah, so the writing became something that I really loved doing. And, writing for film and television was the pinnacle of that. I mean, I love novels and books and short stories, but I mean, to get something on screen, to get, actors to perform my lines and to make my visions like happen, that seemed like the coolest possible thing that you could do. And that really spoke to me. So, thankfully, Gabe believed in us, and I'll tell you what, one of the great things about having a writing partner, obviously you're doing half the work sometimes it feels like twice the work, but the best thing for me has been Gabe has constantly like pushed me forward and said like, this is something we can do. Writing for television isn't a pipe dream like we were led to believe. All you have to do is have some talent, some perseverance, and then make your own opportunities. And so that was that's basically how it happened. He moved out here about 5 years ago, out to LA, and he was all in. He decided that he wanted to do this, and so he started waiting tables at an upscale restaurant here. He did that 4 days a week. He was a personal assistant for a writer, and he was just saying, look, this is going to happen, even though I was less convinced that it was a possibility. So I mean, I owe him a lot for that, actually. Yeah.
So now you guys kept on writing, but you didn't move to LA until this year. So what happened? Where were you at that point?
After Gabe moved out, I finished my MA from Eastern Michigan, and then I still wasn't convinced that this was a thing that we could do full time. We were still writing together. We would write screenplays, sort of the same style we'd done all along, just long distance and emailing drafts and back and forth to each other. The FDR files as they were at the time, like we just bounce back and forth to each other.
Yeah.
But I still wasn't convinced. It still seemed like something that I couldn't do. So I ended up getting another master's degree in MFA from Ohio State.
Oh my goodness.
Which is crazy. I became this perennial student. Thankfully, I wasn't paying for these degrees. They had a stipend if you taught undergraduate English classes.
Oh, okay.
So that was how I was able to pull that off.
Wow. So your MFA was in what?
That was also in fiction writing. I applied for a few screenwriting MFAs and I didn't get in. Probably rightfully so, because everything I'd written with a partner, and my skills and talent was still pretty raw at that point. And so I'd applied to USC and UCLA, and I didn't get in, and so Ohio State let me in for fiction writing. Probably because my fiction skills were a little bit more polished. And, I did that. And, I think, at that point, it was right when I started the MFA was when our TV and film writing career started to actually have some positive momentum, beyond just the decision of, this is something we want to do. It actually started moving a little bit, and that's due in no small part to Gabe actually being out in LA, and trying to make things happen, entering contests and joining writing groups and submitting our screenplays to like online workshop sites like Trigger Street and Zoetrope and things like that. And because of that, we had entered a contest called trackingbee.com, which is a relatively small industry website that just follows the progress of scripts and people as they move around Hollywood. And it was the first time they'd done the contest. I think it was the writer's strike might have been going on at the time. And so we'd entered this contest with a feature that we called Jailbait, which was a comedy about guys who start dating female inmates at a prison and all the shenanigans that ensues from that. And we didn't end up winning, but we got honorable mention. And that got us some interest from the people that were reading the site, the producers and managers. And we got, a dozen, 15 maybe requests for the script from people in the business, which was
really
so surprising to us because
yeah.
we'd entered, Scriptapalooza, Zoetrope has a contest. We'd entered a few contests that we'd gotten quarterfinalist or semifinalist in, but nothing that had actually got us any kind of interest. And from this interest, we met with Tyler Boehm, who is the creative executive at a little production company called Sobini Films. Mm-hmm. And that became our first option. We developed it with them for a couple of months, and they really liked it, and they wanted to go out with it. And so, we got ourselves an entertainment lawyer, and we had our first option.
Wow.
Which was pretty magical, I mean, that's how it's supposed to work, but I feel rarely does sometimes.
Yeah, very cool. So you guys must have been very encouraged.
Yeah. I can remember flying out because I was living in Columbus, Ohio at the time, starting my MFA, and I can remember flying out to LA and just being so nervous, on the flight, sitting in their office building, the waiting room. They have office space at Lionsgate, so it was even like a bigger thing. It felt like this is a real thing. This is something that we could actually do. So we were very excited, but Tyler ended up being really cool and a great guy to work with, a great first, creative executive to work with, because he was so supportive, of us as writers. And, he knew that we didn't have much experience, but, as a writer himself, he was able to help us sort of navigate this new world that we were in.
Very cool. And then after that, you sold a TV pitch to Spike TV. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so this was our first foray into television. What happened was Tyler at Sobini had a friend at Comedy Central. He sent the script over. The guy asked if we had any TV ideas. We sent a few over. We wrote up some treatments, and none of them were right for Comedy Central, but they sent the ideas over to Spike TV, which they share office space there, or they did at one point. And Spike read the ideas and really loved the treatments that we'd written, but asked us, these aren't exactly the ideas for us, but what else do you have? So we came up with an idea. Gabe and I are both from the Midwest. We're both from, Michigan, and a lot of our families are tied to the auto industry, like that's sort of a thing in Michigan, And so, we had this idea for a workplace comedy, set at a used car lot, this one of these industries that's sort of dying, and Cash for Clunkers was going on at the time, and it seemed like it was in the zeitgeist, if you will. And so we pitched them this idea, and they bought it. And this is with, our only writing sample that we had was that, or our only sort of semi-professional writing sample was that Jailbait script.
Wow.
And so they were, very, very generous in, finding an idea to work with us on, one, and then two, once we came up with that idea, agreeing that, these guys can make this happen. So that was a bit of serendipity there, but it was very, again, I think we've just run into really great people. You hear that Hollywood is full of sharks and everyone's looking to take advantage of you, or at least that's the fear. Mm-hmm. But, so far, at least that has not been our experience. We've run into 99% great people that are just interested in finding good stories that they can, make something happen with. So,
yeah. Well, that brings up an interesting point, because it's funny. I really think that it is mostly about fear, and it's not that there aren't the scary people, right? But my experience is that every single where I look, every single person I meet or that I talk to is so incredibly helpful and friendly, and right. And ultimately it makes sense, because they don't know that you're not going to be the next insert big name.
Right.
And so everybody that I've met, at least, sort of has the attitude, well, you could be somebody sometime soon, so I'm going to be nice to you.
Sure.
But I think what happens is that you don't get connected to those people. And
Right.
then Hollywood is just a scary place.
Right. It is, from a couple of guys coming from, West Michigan, I mean, we had zero contacts. And so that was frightening, I think that's ultimately why we started with the contest approach, because you don't have to know anybody. You just have to have $50,
Yeah.
That approach can get pricey, but I mean, that's certain. I mean, that's how we started. I mean, that's how we met the people that we've met, and I think that what we've done is, every person that we've met, we've tried to be as fun to work with, as agreeable. We've tried to take notes in a positive way and see them for what they are. We've tried to treat people with respect. And I think that's important. And I think it's unfortunately something that writers don't always do. And just in doing that, everyone we've met has led us to another person or another few people. And that's how we've slowly started to build our network out, is just, Tyler at Sobini knows, Tony at Comedy Central, who knows Dustin at Spike. And, that kind of network just builds on itself if you're a good person, if you're fun to work with, and if you've got, enough talent to make your ideas happen.
Well, and that explains also, you did other projects with Spike, but before that, tell me a little bit about Men in Uniform and what happened from that.
Yeah, so we had a little bit of success with the TV. Like, we'd sold our first pilot, which was super encouraging. We, though, were still really interested in feature writing, and, hadn't really gotten out of that mentality of doing a contest yet. So, and since we had luck with that Tracking B contest, we'd written another feature script, which we called Men in Uniform, which was sort of a play on words. It was about a group of high school kids who wore their Star Trek uniforms to school. So it's sort of, the movie was kind of super bad at a sci-fi convention. They were looking for, this actress, sort of a Buffy the Vampire Slayer type girl who, one of them was desperately in love with, and they sort of followed her around this Comic-Con kind of place. And anyway, we'd written that script as sort of, I mean, it wasn't sci-fi based, it was definitely comedy, but it had that sci-fi slant to it. And we entered it in the contest, and this time, we didn't win. We didn't get honorable mention. We didn't place, but one of the people that runs the contest, during a judge's dinner, I guess I've heard this story third hand. So I think what happened was, during a judge's dinner, one of the judges was talking about a project that he was working on, which was a web series. And it was a sort of a sci-fi fanboy web series. And somebody had read our script and said, oh, well, they didn't place, but this script is really funny. It's called Men in Uniform. And they gave it to this guy, Russ, at Divide Pictures. And Russ read it and sent us an email and said, hey, guys, I read this script. We're doing a web series with MSN. Are you guys interested in writing some episodes? So again, we entered that contest, and even though we didn't win, we sort of made another contact in the industry.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
And so was it after that web series or through that web series that you signed with Abstract Entertainment for management? Yeah,
absolutely. What happened was we were writing that web series with it was called Ultradome. We were writing, it was kind of a live action celebrity deathmatch, but it had all of the superheroes and supernatural characters. Like the two geeks have an argument over who would win in a fight. The Incredible Hulk or Wolverine. And so it's a comedy thing, but it also these geeks would have this argument, and then magically they would be transported to the Ultradome, where, given the powers of whoever they were arguing for, they would battle to the death. It was a silly thing, but it was a lot of fun to write, and Russ was great to work with. And one day, we just got an email from Russ after we'd turned in some scripts, and he said, guys, this is Mike and Josh of Abstract Entertainment. And like we looked and sure enough, he'd CC'd 2 other people on the email. And they're up and coming managers and you're up and coming writers. You guys should meet up for some coffee. So, that's how we met our management team.
Wow.
And at the time they were called Abstract Entertainment. But since then, they've joined New Wave Entertainment, which is a much bigger management and production company. And so now we're with the same guys, same managers, but with New Wave Entertainment.
Very cool. And so after that, you sold a second comedy to Spike TV. And tell me about that one. Yeah.
I think what happens is if you can execute, at least, this is my small viewpoint because like I've only had so much experience, but what it seems to me happens is if you can execute your ideas in a way like quickly and you can be positive when you get the notes, like even if a project doesn't go through, like eventually that car lot project fell through because, whatever number of reasons projects don't end up getting greenlit, Spike still liked working with us and we'd sort of developed a relationship. And so they said, look, guys, we've had this idea to do a military themed project for a while. What ideas do you have? So we pitched them an idea which we called At Ease, which was about, basically it was a Stripes-esque comedy as if Bill Murray had graduated from basic training and then become a drill instructor. That's sort of what it was. He was now like, sort of the inmates were running the asylum at this specific Army training base. And so, it was it was a fun project to work on. And with comedy, it's difficult to get into themes like military themes. You don't want to treat war and that kind of thing lightly. You don't want to come off as disrespectful. And so we felt that, to do a military themed project, it's best to keep it at the training base. And that's what Spike had thought as well. So we just came up with some fun characters and we pitched them this idea and they like our take on it. So they bought that project from us.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. And so then came some representation, which you'd already been working for quite a while and sold a number of things. So tell me about that process and what that represented to you guys.
Yeah, well, at the time, our managers were still Abstract Entertainment, and they were much stronger in feature writing than they were in television writing. And so they said to us, look, guys, we love you. We want to help you out. But I think, it's going to be best if we had a partner to help you, explore the TV world a little bit more fully. And so they had a relationship with Melissa Orton at APA, and she was a relatively new agent there and TV agent, but very, up and coming, very much a hustler, And I think that's actually really important when you're a new writer. You don't want an agent that is so high on the totem pole. You don't want like Ari Emanuel, because that guy doesn't have to return your phone calls because he's working on $1 million deals. And, Spike's been very generous with us, but it wasn't $1 million deals that we were getting for these shows.
Yeah.
And so we met with her and she was very positive about the work that we'd done. And I think too, agents are always interested in clients that can market themselves and can prove that they can get work on their own,
Makes sense.
An agent is, obviously there to help you with your career, like as a writer, but you can imagine that as an agent, you would much rather have the client who's willing to work hard and to be out there on their own, to do their own networking, and to not just sit back. You hear these stories about new writers who get their first representation, like they've written 1 or 2 scripts, and then they just sort of sit back and they say, okay, now time for the Brinks truck to back up to the house, And I just don't, at least for me, that's not how it's been. So, we were very lucky to sign with Melissa, and she's been amazing for us. Very hard worker, out there hitting the pavement and getting our faces and names in front of people, getting our scripts in front of people. So that's been great.
Mm-hmm. So what physically happened? Like, did you then take a lot of meetings, or you teamed up with 6 Point Harness? How did that happen?
Well, Melissa had a relationship with 6 Point Harness is basically what happened. And we took a ton of meetings. I was still in Columbus. I flew out, for, I think it was a week and a half. It may have been, it was a week and a half. And I think during those 10 days or 6 or 7 business days, we took 17 or 18 meetings.
Wow.
So that was a very chock full schedule. And that was all due to the fact that I didn't live in LA. And so all these meetings were jammed in there. So we met with production companies. We met with people at studios and networks. We met, anybody that showed any interest in the writing samples that we've been working on and the projects that, the scripts that we've done for Spike, anybody that had any interest in us as writers, Melissa got us in front of. And that was really great. And obviously Roar was setting up meetings for us at the same time. So it was cool the way it kind of worked there. I just said Roar, which is probably going to be confusing, actually. Mm-hmm. I can clarify basically, our managers were at Abstract, and then Abstract got bought by Roar Entertainment, and they were there for a year, and then our managers left Roar to go to New Wave.
Oh, okay.
So that's a little bit confusing. I don't know if you want to edit that out or whatever.
Oh, no. It actually, that's helpful too, because it's helpful to people to know that in the industry that it's often about the people. It's like people say, like, wouldn't you love to be with UTA? Well, if the people that have gotten you where you are not at UTA, then maybe you don't want to be there.
Absolutely. I mean, APA is certainly not, the biggest agency. I mean, it's an upper mid-level agency. I don't know what size rank it is, but right now at this point in my career, I mean, I wouldn't rather be anywhere else because, our agent has been amazing for us. Like, she returns phone calls, she returns emails, she will, she plays us straight, she's not going to sugarcoat things for us. And that's really important to us, and the same thing with New Wave. They're very, those people that we've come up with, and have helped develop us as writers have been really instrumental in getting us to where we are.
Mm-hmm. Well, so tell me about what happened with 6 Point Harness, because that's an animation company. So mm-hmm. What did you do with them?
6 Point Harness was, like I said, it was a company that Melissa had a relationship with, and she got us in front of them. We hadn't thought about doing animation before, but Gabe and I are both big fans of, Simpsons and Family Guy, Futurama, and the Boondocks, and lots of these animation programs that are doing cool things like we were fans of. We just hadn't thought about writing for animation. And so when we got in front of 6 Point, we sort of pitched them a couple of ideas that we had, just sort of soft pitched it, just, one-liners. And they ended up, they really responded to some of them. And we ended up coming up with an idea, or Gabe actually had this idea while he was in jury duty. We knew that what we wanted to do was something that was funny, but that was sort of an action comedy. Mm-hmm. And animation seemed the perfect venue because you can do violent things and it's more acceptable. It's not so visceral. You don't have the same reaction as a viewer. And so a place like Comedy Central or FX or Adult Swim or Spike can do those kinds of shows now. And so we pitched them an animated Western, which was this super violent kind of thing, sort of like all of the topicality of a show like Deadwood, like mm-hmm. all that kind of, the racism and the sexism and the opium use and the, all of that stuff that was the American West. We had this idea to sort of satirize that and to make it into this animated show. So They loved that. 6 Point Harness came up with some character sketches and some designs. They didn't do a full animatic, but they did like a couple of cells from that. And then we brought those with us. We brought a representative from 6 Point with us when we were pitching to Spike TV and FX and Comedy Central and G4. And that was really helpful in selling that pitch. And we ended up selling again to Spike TV.
Oh, wow.
Which was, sort of crazy that we were kind of this incestuous little Spike TV family. But
well, hey, if it works.
Yeah, exactly. And we sold them that project, and it ended up being really fun to work on. And I think still to this day, even though Spike finally did end up passing on it, it's still to this day, I think, one of my favorite projects that we've worked on. Because, animation is just so fun. You can do anything.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, you then got your first staff gig. Tell me about that.
My daughter had just been born, my first kid, and she was, I think, 2 weeks old when our agent called us up and said, guys, there's a staff writing position on a new show that MTV just picked up called Death Valley. It's this horror comedy. They've read your pilot that you'd sold to Spike, that At Ease military thing. They love it. They want you to come in and do an interview. And I said, my daughter was just born. I can't go now. And my daughter was actually in the hospital at the time because she was born early. And so they needed to do, she was in the intensive care unit. And so she talked to the showrunner and the producers, Eric Weinberg, and the producers, which the guys at Liquid Theory. And they agreed to let me do the interview over the phone while Gabe was there in person.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was unheard of.
Wow.
And so Gabe was there in person. I was doing the phone interview literally from the waiting room of the hospital in Columbus, Ohio.
My goodness.
And we just clicked with them. I mean, they responded to our writing style and our sort of style of comedy, and we really enjoyed the pilot that we'd read of Death Valley. I mean, it was a very sort of aggressive kind of sort of like what I was saying with that Western, that animated Western. Like, they were willing to do crazy, violent stuff mixed in with the comedy because, these are monsters that they're attacking, not regular people, And so the show is basically, for those who don't know, it follows the Undead Task Force, which is a branch of the LAPD, and they're in charge of containing this outbreak of zombies, vampires, and werewolves. They're sort of in charge of containing it just to the San Fernando Valley, hence Death Valley. I mean, that's the idea there. And so it's this comedy. It's a faux, like a mockumentary, kind of faux documentary thing. And it was very fun. And just thankfully the staffing interview went really well. Gabe likes to tell me that he was glad I wasn't there because I would have just screwed it up for us. So, but yeah, it went very well, and they responded to us. And I think also as a writing team, especially for comedy, but for any writing team, you're attractive to showrunners and producers because they can pay you as if you're one person, but they actually get two people out of it. So in a writer's room, I think there's some value to that.
Mm-hmm. And now you were not living in LA. And so how on earth did you do a staff job when you weren't there?
Yeah, so we ended up getting the job. My daughter was 3 weeks old. She got home from the hospital. I talked to my wife and said, look, I can't not do this. If there's any possible way of doing this, I have to take my first staff job because they just don't grow on trees. And, as I said, she has been just miraculously supportive. And so she said, you do what you have to do. So she was on maternity leave, so she went to stay with her parents with our daughter, and I flew out to LA. Thankfully, Gabe has a spare bed and a spare bedroom, and so I just slept there for the duration of our gig on Death Valley.
Wow, and you've actually got an episode coming up, episode 106. airs on October 3rd in the U.S. And I think in Canada, it's carried by Much Music.
Yeah, it's MTV in the States on Monday nights at 10:30 Eastern, but in Canada, it's on Much Music, and I want to say it's on Tuesdays, but I don't know that for a fact.
Anyway, just check the schedule. But October 3rd, very cool.
Yeah, we're very excited.
Yeah, neat stuff. And so while you were sleeping on the couch, were you thinking, I got to move to LA, or what? What was that happening?
Yeah,
there?
I mean, it sort of becomes clear that if you really want to have a job as a TV writer, you just can't do it from anywhere else. I mean, I had these ideas in my head that what would happen is we would sell a big feature or we would get an extended staffing job. And the job on Death Valley was great, but it was only a couple months long. And I had thought that maybe magically we would get a staffing job that would be, 40 weeks or, most of a year anyways, or we'd sell a feature and it would be enough money to sort of move us out and we could live on for a year. But the truth of it is for us that what we needed to do was just decide that we had to be here. And, so my wife is a teacher. She got a job out here. And once she got that job, we just said, this is it. We're moving. So we just finally came out here in July, finally got a place. And, so we're here now full time. And I got to tell you, if there's listeners out there that think that, that there's a way to do television writing from someplace else, I have been the luckiest person possible in terms of, I had a writing partner who was living in LA who magically didn't stop wanting to be my writing partner because I wasn't there. I was able to do an interview over the phone. We got a staffing gig sight unseen sort of.
Wow.
And still, I don't think it's possible to do it.
Yeah.
Not for any length of time anyways. And, so I think it was just one of those things where we had to sort of decide, my wife and I, that this is something that we needed to do, and we moved out.
Wow, very, very cool, and great. You have a wife who's so supportive.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, I've been very lucky with her. Actually, that's another thing that it's difficult sometimes. I think with people's real lives and family and other commitments. But if you want to write for TV, I think you have to. I think you got to come out to the left coast.
Yeah. Cool. And so since then you've been busy, sold another pitch to MTV, you've been pitching other ideas around. But now that you're in LA, what's your goal? What's happening? What do you think is coming?
Well, we've had, like you said, we've had some success. We sold another pitch. It's also an animated pitch. We've been pitching around, during this sort of network pitch season, ideas to the broadcast networks. We've been, working hard. We just finished a feature. We've got that in development with Vince Vaughn's production company. We've been doing a lot on all fronts. I mean, I think our policy has sort of been the busier you can keep yourselves, the better, because at this point, I think at any given time, we have between 8 and 10 projects we're working on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important because it just becomes evident that projects can die for no reason or at the drop of a hat. There's always a reason. It's just what the reason is usually out of your control as a writer.
Yeah. And
so we try to work on as many projects as possible. I mean, the dream, of course, is to sell a pitch that a network falls in love with, and they end up, going to series on it, and we end up being, co-executive producers and making that happen. I mean, that's the dream. And I think it definitely is possible. It's just, it's a numbers game at some point, you've got to get enough swings at the ball before you can hit the home run. So we've just been working hard to develop a lot of ideas. You can't fall in love with any idea too much because, who knows if that's not going to be the idea for a network, or they're going to love it for 1 minute and then fall out of love with it. It's a lot of things that can happen. So we've just tried to be idea machines, just generating new concepts, new ideas for TV and films. So, I mean, that's the dream, is to have our own show at some point. But when that's going to happen, I could not tell you.
Well, it does. I mean, just hearing you, it seems like you guys have generated a lot of ideas. And even when you were in these situations and they said, "What else have you got?" you had other things.
Right.
And so tell me a little bit about that. Obviously you've worked with Gabe for years and years and years now.
Right.
But where do you guys get your ideas from? What kind of time do you spend spitballing, and what's your process like in that sense?
I mean, depending on where we are at any given week, we have tried to spend one day a week, at least an hour or two that day, generating ideas. And Gabe is better at this than I am, just sort of pulling ideas from the ether. But I think it's important to spend time coming up with the material that's going to feed your career down the road. Maybe you come up with a one line for something, or just like a scrap of an idea. You put it down in an idea file somewhere, and you leave it there. And then at some point, oh yeah, I had this idea for a show about a robot maid, and somebody's looking for a show about robotic, house cleaners. Maybe we could do something. I think it's important to continually be coming up with new ideas, and to not fall in love too much with any one thing. I don't remember who said it, and I'm going to butcher the quote here, but something about, you got to kill your darlings, like when you're editing prose. It's the same thing. You can't fall in love with any one idea, because it's just, they're so fleeting.
And so just to be clear, that's even when you're going full tilt on a feature, you're still taking time out to generate new ideas?
Absolutely. And when you're not generating new ideas actively, I think it's important to be reading. I think you need to read, blogs and newspapers, magazines, other scripts. I think you need to be watching television, lots of television. I watch so much television, it is insane. And movies, and taking in, because what ends up happening, I think, at least for me, is I'll come up with ideas, or I'll spend a few days just generating ideas, and eventually it feels like the barrel is empty, like my well has run dry. And what happens, I find, is that if I then start consuming other material, thinking about other things, unrelated things, like living life, talking to people, being, doing those other things that you need to do to be a good conversationalist for meetings, to be a good person, those things, I think, help to replenish your supply of ideas, because you never know where it's going to come from. It might be like an article from, The Economist. Gabe came up with a great idea for a television show based off of like an anecdote he heard about David Bowie. I think it's, while you're generating new ideas, while you're working on your projects, you need to also be absorbing other work as well, and to not just try to keep digging at this same dry well. You need to replenish that also.
Well, something I'm curious about is you had actually sold quite a few ideas and projects. You had things optioned and had pitches sold, but along the way, how did you develop the craft?
I think there was a few different ways, and I think that writers would be well advised to sort of approach it in a couple of ways. One is, you just have to read a lot of pilots. Watch television and read pilots. I think there's no better way to understand the craft than to read a pilot or a script that was written by someone that totally knows what they're doing and is totally in control of their art, And, I know that the TV writer chat, and I know that you specifically have set up a great resource of just full of pilots that people can read, scripts that people can download and read. And that kind of stuff is invaluable. You can read as many books as you want. And there's been great books. Chad Gervich's Small Screen, Big Picture. Oh, yeah. And, Ellen Sandler's TV writer's workbook, Thinking Inside the Box. There's lots of great books out there that can help you. But I think that the only way to really learn is to read someone doing it well, and then to write lots and lots of material yourself.
Yeah, I honestly, I get embarrassed sometimes when I realize, boy, I had 20 minutes there. 20 minutes is all it takes to read a half-hour TV script.
Absolutely.
Like you got 45 minutes that you spent doing what? You could have just read a TV pilot right there.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what I've done, just to help me be more on top of that. My again, magical wife gave me an iPad for my first Father's Day, and I've loaded that thing with pilots that I haven't read. And when I have a free moment, I just get it out and like leaf through. It's super easy to go through a PDF on that. It's very quick. And you can stand in line, you're waiting in your car for someone to come out, you're, whatever it is, sitting on the couch. I mean, there's time to read these things. And I think that people make more excuses for why they haven't than, and I've been guilty of that too, but I just think that if you really want to get better, that's one of the things you have to do.
Yeah. And by the way, you can get links to all those things at tvwriterpodcast.com. That script archive that Mike's talking about is the Lee Thompson script archive. If you go to the resource links, there's one for scripts. Look for the Lee Thompson script archive. There are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of produced and unproduced pilots, which are also quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so all of that is great advice. Any other advice to people who want to break in? We talked about a few things. Number one, you said move to LA, get a job in LA, especially if you don't have a magical writing partner who's living there.
I'm assuming not everyone can have that.
Yeah. But anything else you've learned that could be helpful to people who are wanting to do this?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the big things, and the thing that surprises me the most, is when we first started, selling projects and talking to our first contacts in the business, how often we heard something along the lines of like, wow, you guys are really easy to talk to and fun and, and nice. And it, in a way that leads you to believe that's just not true of everybody. I think that it is so important to be able to go into any meeting, a notes meeting, a general, an interview with a showrunner. I think it's so important to be able to go into those meetings and to be confident, to sell yourself, to be an agreeable person. I mean, writing is obviously like a very lonely thing when you're actually doing the writing itself, but that doesn't mean that you have to be a hermit. It is such a business built on who you know that I think people let that daunt them, sometimes because it does seem scary. Like, I don't know anybody. I mean, that's true. But if you're a good person and a nice person and easy to talk to, then you're going to meet people, especially if you live in LA. Eventually, you're going to meet people. And the better you are to talk to, the more likely those people are going to want to work with you. I mean, it is absolutely true that you have to be good at what you do to continually work. But, I mean, given the choice between being an amazing writer and being, look at it from the showrunner's point of view. Given the choice between hiring a guy who's going to come in with like amazing scripts, but might not be so good in the room, versus someone who's going to contribute and be fun and pleasant to be around during those weeks on end that you're just staring at each other across the table. I mean, if the second guy had any ability at all to come in with a script on time, I think I'd go with that guy. Yeah. So, it's just surprising to me that people don't put enough emphasis on that aspect of it. And it's just, it's part of networking. And, I think that term gets thrown around a lot. Networking just means, not being afraid to talk to people. And when you do talk to people, like being a good guy, being a salesperson for yourself.
Very, very good advice. Well, we're coming to the end of our time here. I do want to thank you so much for taking part, and definitely I urge everybody to check out Mike's episode on MTV or Much Music, October 3rd or thereabouts. If Canadians do check your listings, I think you're right that it might be Tuesday, but yeah. Definitely check that.
Yeah, please do. Please do. The show is so fun to work on, and I think I think a lot of, if you like Zombieland, if you like Shaun of the Dead, that kind of thing, this is going to be right up your alley.
Yeah, Death Valley. Watch for it. Cool. Well, we'll see you on TV Writer Chat on Sunday nights and on Twitter.
Absolutely. If you want to follow me, I'm happy to chat with any listeners, answer questions. I'm Alber, Alber, on Twitter, so please do.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Mike, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hosted by Gray Jones, the TV Writer Podcast is brought to you by Script Magazine and ScriptMag.com, the leading source for scriptwriting information in print and on the web, and by Final Draft scriptwriting software, the entertainment industry standard for scriptwriting worldwide.